Everybody for coming here this morning. We're pleased to have everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning. Please continue to serve yourselves, but please turn cell phones to silent mode. My name is Ben Dupuy. I'm a member of the BGR Board of Directors and chair of the Breakfast Briefing Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome you to BGR's third breakfast briefing of 2023 with First Horizon Bank. I want to extend our gratitude to WWNO New Orleans Public Radio, which will rebroadcast this event on Wednesday, October 4th at 9 p.m. We hope you'll take advantage of the question and answer portion of today's program. It's easy to participate. Use your phone to scan the QR code on the instructions at your seat and access the online Q&A forum. The QR code will also be up on the screen during the Q&A session. However, if you prefer to write your question, please hand it to a BGR staff member and include your name if you would like to be identified. There will also be a QR code to complete an online survey designed to gather feedback following the program. Again, we will show that code on the screen, or you may refer to your instructions. The best way to stay on top of all BGR events and research is to become a member. BGR is a private, nonprofit, independent research organization dedicated to informed policymaking and the effective use of public resources for the improvement of government in the New Orleans metropolitan area. We regularly engage with our members about our public policy work. BGR values this dialogue, and we appreciate our members' support in amplifying BGR's good government recommendations. If you're not currently a member, visit bgr.org and consider joining the ranks of empowered citizens working to improve local government. We also encourage you to follow BGR on social media. And now to introduce our topic this morning is Becky Mowbray, BGR's President and CEO.
Thanks, Ben. I'd like to recognize First Horizon Bank for its generous sponsorship of BGR's breakfast briefings again this year. Your support allows BGR to make these events free and available to the public. It is wonderful to see everyone today, so many old friends and new ones, and we're delighted that we are on your calendar for today. My name is Becky Mowbray, and I serve as President and CEO of the Bureau of Governmental Research. BGR's research reports identify solutions to some of the most complex and significant challenges facing our metro area and local government in Jefferson, Orleans, and St. Tammany parishes. BGR also helps to inform voters with independent, nonpartisan analysis of local ballot propositions. We have just released 3 reports on a school facilities tax renewal and 2 proposed charter amendments on the October 14th ballot in Orleans Parish. There's a couple of copies of them up front if you want to pick up a copy while you're here. And in the coming months, we'll be releasing a dashboard about property taxes in the metro area and a report about the Fair Share Infrastructure Program. Breakfast briefings advance BGR's mission by allowing citizens to hear directly from government officials and experts in public policy issues vital to the New Orleans metro area. We will have one more breakfast briefing this year in December, and it will focus on public safety. If you are not able to attend a briefing, you can go to bgr.org to watch replays of these events. Today's topic will include discussion on the Roadwork NOLA program, its challenges, current focus, and where we go from here. The words street repairs can be controversial in New Orleans, especially among residents here in the city. With numerous road projects underway, New Orleanians want to know how these projects are prioritized and when they will be completed. They want to know that the city is spending their tax dollars prudently, especially with rising construction costs. Residents also want to know how the city selects contractors and holds them accountable for their performance. What's at stake is an unprecedented $2 billion in FEMA funding for flood-damaged streets and hundreds of millions of dollars in street improvement bonds authorized by New Orleans voters. Today's discussion is intended to help citizens and policymakers learn about the challenges of repairing and maintaining New Orleans street infrastructure and how city leaders are deploying public resources so that New Orleans can achieve resiliency. For several months, 2 city administrators have led this charge. One is Joseph Threat, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Infrastructure and Chief Resilience Officer for the City of New Orleans. The other is Sarah McLaughlin-Porteous, Chief of Staff for Operations and Infrastructure and Acting Director of Public Works. Joe brought a wealth of knowledge and expertise in operations, training, facility support, and emergency management when he joined the City of New Orleans in 2018 as a member of Mayor Cantrell's transition team. He supports the mayor in navigating current issues in operations, emergency management, capital projects, and oversight of key staff. He helped guide the city through some of its recent crises, such as the collapse of the Hard Rock Hotel, COVID-19, and Hurricane Ida. Joe manages more than $2.5 billion in federal construction funds for streets and other capital projects. Sarah Porteous is a seasoned communications strategist who serves as Chief of Staff for Operations and Infrastructure and Acting Director of the Department of Public Works. She is a certified project management professional, and Sarah previously served as Director of Communications for Mayor Mitch Landrieu. In 2017, Sarah was tapped to build a new program, Roadwork NOLA, where she was charged with managing public engagement for the city's $2.3 billion infrastructure program. She oversees 7 divisions and 215 employees. Sarah has recently decided to move on after 8 years at City Hall, and today is her last day with the City of New Orleans. We are delighted that she has chosen to spend part of her final day at the city with BGR. At the conclusion of today's presentation, I will be moderating a Q&A session. I'm sure there will be many questions after Joe and Sarah's thought-provoking discussion. And as Ben mentioned, you can send in your questions by accessing the online Q&A form with the QR code on the screen or in the printed instructions we provided on your seat. I would also like to note that the views expressed in this program are those of our speakers. Please join me in welcoming Joe and Sarah.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here, and I'm glad that you could come attend. It's always a great opportunity when us in government, public servants, serving the people of New Orleans can come and kind of give you insight on some of the things that are happening within the city as far as infrastructure is concerned. Little background from me, just to amplify what Becky was talking about. I'm a 26-year Marine. Worked most of my life in operations in the Marine Corps, retired, went into private sector, and served in positions of senior vice president, business development, business relations, and ran my own company, Threat Defense, as president, CEO in Department of Defense sector for about 8 years. After that, I was asked by a good friend of mine to come serve as chief of staff for the FEMA Louisiana Recovery Office here in New Orleans. And that job really covered about 1,500 staff and 40 direct reports. I was reluctant, but I took the job. And soon after I became chief of staff, my boss, Tony Russell, moved down to be FEMA Region 6 administrator. And he told me, hey, Joe, you're the executive director for the Louisiana Recovery Office. So I had the responsibility to manage disasters from Katrina, Rita, Gustav Ike, Mississippi River flooding, all the other disasters in Louisiana from 2009 to 2012. Mostly proud of my staff putting together the single settlement for the Recovery School District, where we built 83 brand new schools out of the platforms of 123 schools that was damaged during Hurricane Katrina. Soon after that, I went back to corporate, and then I was asked by the Cantrell administration, because of my FEMA background, to come in and manage the FEMA and federal government portfolio that included not only the FEMA work that we have today, but hazard mitigation, the National Disaster Resilience Program through HUD, and also the HMGP program from FEMA. So when I took that over, I was the Director of Project Delivery for the City of New Orleans. I came in May of, on the transition team, May of 2018. I worked that position until my boss, Ramsey Green, who was the Deputy CEO for Infrastructure, resigned and left the city, and the mayor asked me to step up and take that position. And I've been in that position since May of 2022. Upon accepting that position, I knew I needed a chief of staff, and at that point, Josh Hartley, who was our current director of Public Works, had resigned, and I asked Sarah Porteous, who's sitting next to me, to step up and not only be my chief of staff, but take over the acting position of DPW director. So with that said, I'd like to just step back from that time frame and tell you where we were and where we came from. So in May 18, when we came on board, the $2 billion settlement for the city for FEMA Joint Infrastructure Road Program, it was only 1% spent of the $2 billion grant that was awarded in 2016. Also, the National Disaster Resilience Grant with $141 million, it was not 1% spent. Only design work was being done, and if I can go back for the JIRR, all the projects for JIRR, I think it was 200 plus projects, street and road projects, were already designed. So those packages were ready to go, and my job as the director of project delivery was to push the federal grant money out into the streets, get the grant rolling. Now you have to understand, when we came in 2018, the grant was awarded in 2016, but it was Katrina money from 2005. So our current period of performance for the Katrina disaster ended in 2023, July. So you can imagine my mindset of having to push out this money on the streets and get construction rolling at a rapid rate to meet that 2023 deadline that was the Katrina disaster. And this is like no other disaster. If you think about it, the Katrina disaster was the end of the disaster for Katrina, just like a Northridge earthquake or Hurricane Sandy. Usually in FEMA standards, a long-term disaster is 10 years, but most of you folks know that disasters are running well beyond the 10-year mark. And if you look at it right now from 2005 till today, you can just do the math. We're working really hard right now with my FEMA Region 6, who the administrator will be here in November, to extend that period of performance. Right now, our period of performance expires February 2024. I've got a lot of projects to get out on the street, and I need an extension for this program. FEMA has told me that to get those extensions, I have to show them NTPs, notice to proceed for construction, and we're doing that right now. We have 10 projects right now in the chute, going out in different areas of the neighborhoods, and I'll let Sarah talk about how we've changed things to be more strategic and going in these neighborhoods. But if I can step back, when I push this money to the Department of Public Works to get out on the street, because of state public bid law, the lowest bidder wins the work. So if I'm a low bidder, I win the work. But what I didn't know, the work was 200 blocks. I'm lowest bidder, I bid again, I win the work. I've got 400 blocks of construction. So where neighbors are frustrated is they say, hey, I live on the street, I don't see construction going on, but in the contractor's means and methods, he's doing construction 200 blocks away from you, and they're moving work crews. The other thing I found out is that residents were telling me a story, hey, Mr. Threat, this is going on. Contractors were giving me another story saying, hey, we're doing okay. So what I did when I took over this position is I told Sarah, hey, let's go to the field. And I started actual field visits with the contractor, with the designer, with the residents, with the grant writers, with my staff, DPW program managers, project managers, Sewer and Water Board, my partners for Sewer and Water Board, to actually go to these construction sites, find out what's going on, and in that circle of professionals, make decisions. We continue those site visits today. But what I found out at that time was we were at capacity. We were at capacity. I'd go to a site visit and I'd see the same DBE, disadvantaged business, that was doing asphalt and concrete, curb, sidewalk, was with one construction company. I go to a different part of the city, to a different construction company, I'd see the same DBE doing curb, sidewalks. And I said, this is impossible. When I looked at the labor crews, they were rotating the crews, rotating the DBEs around the city, around those 400 blocks to keep up. That's the frustration in the city. So in September last year, I stopped construction. I put a halt to putting out new projects. I put a halt to putting out awarding bids, because at the same time, because of inflation, supply chain management, the price of materials going up, our bids, we would have a budget for $18 million, the bid would come in at $60 million. And I could not waste the taxpayers' money to award those contracts. So we took a pause from September till this year, I think, Sarah, early in the year before we started back work. Sarah's going to talk about some of the methods that we put in place, but it's important for the city because this is a very old city. And I know most of you, I wasn't born and raised here, I came here in '94, but I imagine most of you have never seen this much construction since you've been here. It's a massive project, very complex. When we put those excavators in the ground and we open it up, we find gas lines that are not even on the drawings. We find energy conflicts. We find cable conflicts, or sometimes the roadway just collapses. Just lately, if you look at the panels that are collapsing in the city, the clay composition of the street, what's under the street, with no rain, the panels across the city is totally falling apart. We're racing to just keep the city intact. At the end of this project, would have completed 10,000 blocks of 20,000 blocks in the city. So it's a challenge for me not only to execute the work that we have right now, but campaign and socialize to the federal government and to Congress and to the infrastructure folks that the city needs more money for infrastructure. Everybody in the city comes to New Orleans to visit, but to keep the infrastructure that is basically built on water functioning is a big job. So with that said, I want to pass the mic over to Sarah to do the run and show, and after our brief, we'll accept your questions as they come forward.
Yeah, thank you, Joe, and good morning, everybody. I want to thank Becky and her team for giving me this opportunity to be here today. As Becky mentioned, today is actually the last day in my career in city government at City Hall, and I can't think of a better way to wrap up the experience than to come here this morning and talk about, so much of the work that I feel so passionate about and have really given so much to over the last 8 years. So welcome, and thank you for having me here. So I'll jump right in. I know you all have lots of questions to ask, and Joe kind of gave a little bit of an overview, but this first slide is really intended to give you an idea of what the infrastructure landscape was looking like when Joe and I stepped into these roles last year. So just a little bit of the timeline. In December of 2015, that's when we settled with FEMA for all the Hurricane Katrina related damage to our surface and subsurface infrastructure. And then, as Joe mentioned, on May 7th of 2018, when the Cantrell administration began, there were 10 joint infrastructure projects in construction. This is a cost reimbursable program. At that time, there was less than 1% that had been reimbursed. So it was a monumental challenge because there was a real opportunity that we could lose some of that funding if we didn't get projects quickly into the ground. And so we got to work. And then the May 31 of 2022, that sort of gives you a sense when Joe and I stepped into these roles of where we found things. So 47 projects in construction, over $500 million worth of work. We had another 34 projects in the bid and award stage, so upwards or close to $300 million. Another 64 projects in final design, $450 million, and then about 45 projects completed, $290 million. So as Joe mentioned, just sort of the big picture, there are 20,000 blocks around the city, of which 10,000 are going to be addressed through this program. And we found, that there were roughly 3,000 blocks under construction in various stages of construction, just kind of a mess all over the city. The construction industry was certainly oversaturated, both primes and subs. We have a limited number of contractors that are actually working on this program. And one of the things that we found was that most of those contractors had the same DBE subs working for them, and that's certainly what led and contributed to some of the blocks sitting and sitting and sitting. We also walked into a situation where DPW's operating budget had been frozen. So as you can imagine, the morale in the Department of Public Works when I stepped into this role was not where it needs to be to actually get things done. So we had to spend a lot of work on that. And Joe also already talked about the FEMA period of performance, which was rapidly approaching. Okay, so we are always looking through everything with the lens of continuous improvement. As soon as we stepped into these roles, Joe and I started meeting with people, started meeting with engineers, with contractors, with employees, because we really needed to understand all of the issues from their perspectives in order to, think about how to make some changes, make some immediate changes. So as Joe mentioned, one of the things that we did immediately was pause procurement of all new projects. We recognized that this was a risk because the period of performance is something that was obviously looming, but there was just too much going on. There were too many projects in various stages of construction. There was too much disarray happening, and I think this was a really, smart move smart move by Joe to do that. One of the other things that we initiated was a phased-in task order contract approach. And what that essentially means, so traditionally, projects are awarded and a contractor can go out and, they control their own what's called means and methods of construction. So what a task order does is allows us to award an entire contract to a contractor, but we can limit the number of blocks that they are working on by issuing smaller task orders to them. So if a project has 400 blocks, the contractor gets the entire project, but we issue a task order, say, for the first 15 blocks, and then they can't move on until they get to 95% complete. And that is proving to be incredibly effective. Every contract that is now issued in the Department of Public Works is task order based, and it will remain that going forward. And what we're seeing is that it allows us to have more predictable schedules, better schedules. We're not seeing the kind of delays that we've been seeing with the earlier projects, and we're able to give better information to residents. And it's just a better experience during construction, which is, of course, one of our goals. We also began providing report cards publicly on roadwork.nola.gov. So every project manager is responsible for rating various areas of the contractor's performance, and it's tied in with the invoicing process. And all of that information is publicly available because, transparency is one of the most important things. We need to be very transparent about the kinds of things that we're looking at when we talk about contractor performance. So I would certainly encourage you all to go take a look at that. There's a section on roadwork.nola.gov where all of that is available. We also recognized that we needed some additional support. So Joe and I worked on starting the procurement for the Program Management Office, so support office, to help. And CDM Smith, it took quite a while for this to get on board, but we are in the process of onboarding CDM Smith, and we're very excited about the resources that they are bringing. But they have a team that's working, that's actually co-located with our DPW project managers, and they are supporting in various ways. They are in the process of interviewing project managers. They're going to be developing a training program. We've got project managers with varying levels of experience, and so they are helping us to develop some consistency in terms of how we manage projects through the various phases. So we're very excited about that resource. They're also looking at the financial aspects of the program. We know that because of the amount of scope we've had to add to projects, the earlier Wave 1 and Wave 2 projects, we are not going to have enough funding to take us through the end of the program. So they're helping us to analyze that gap so that we can, pursue additional funding to be able to complete the program. Joe wants to. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to bring up, Sarah, that you touched on. When we picked up these projects, they were already designed when we came in 2018. The majority of the FEMA scope of work for these projects was mill and overlay. It was just mill that street, overlay it, and we move out. We weren't going to address the utilities. I think some of my colleagues, Ron Spooner's here with Sewer and Water Board, they had some grants for water, but basically wave 1 and 2 that we talk about was mill and overlay. FEMA gave us the flexibility that said, hey, Joe, if you go in those neighborhoods, we're going to give you flexibility within this single settlement to do curb-to-curb, full-depth reconstruction, sewer, water, the whole works. So what we've done and what the frustration is in the neighborhoods, we could have went in and did mill and overlay, but we decided to do curb-to-curb, full-depth reconstruction of all utilities. And when those excavators come in there, I got emails this morning about somebody's house shaking. I mean, it's heavy equipment. And I don't know if the city is not meant for heavy equipment. We're doing heavy construction right now. So when we open those streets up to do that curb-to-curb full depth, it takes time. And we run into a lot of problems that we have to deal with every day. And that moves us in when the scope changes for the construction company. Now we've got field changes and plan changes. And that's what really takes a lot of time because we've got lawyers involved. We got engineers involved. Sewer and Water Board has to look at the plans with Department of Public Works, and it's just taking time. But I think we're there. I think we're in a better place right now, and that's one thing I want to touch on.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue to Procore. So last year we launched Procore, which is an industry-leading construction management software. The great news about Procore is it's a software that Sewage and Water Board is using, and I think as we move forward, it's very important that that Sewage and Water Board as our partners, that we're all sharing the same software. So we're very excited about Procore. We're about a year into the implementation. And we have about 39 projects that are underway using this system. But as Joe mentioned, plan changes, it's essentially digitizing everything that we do so that we can get through field changes, plan changes, and things that happen during construction much more quickly. We're seeing invoices paid in much less time. 10 days, I think I saw an email about that earlier this week. We're seeing plan changes processed much more quickly. So we're very excited about this. We are requiring that all of our contractors and engineers use the system as well. We're providing ongoing training for them as everybody kind of gets up to speed. We've definitely hit some speed bumps along the way, but it's been great to have the construction contractors and engineers part of our beta testing. And I think we're really getting to a good point with this system, and it's really going to help move our program forward. The other thing that we're doing, obviously, as we think about inflation, exploring new technologies and alternative methods is critically important, something that we recognized early on. So we do have one new contractor in town that's using pipe bursting. It's not a new methodology, but it's new to the Joint Infrastructure Program. And we're very excited about what we're seeing. It's making projects more efficient. It's less interruption for residents during construction because the contractor is able to excavate when they're replacing utilities underneath the ground. They're able to excavate on either end of the segment and then essentially push the new pipe in while they're bursting the old pipe out. And it's really exciting what we're seeing. Very excited about that. So Joe kind of talked about this a little bit, but part of one of the things that we recognized as extremely important was just improving communication and collaboration with the contractor industry. So both construction contractors and engineers, because we are all in this infrastructure program together. If we're not all working together, we knew that we could not be successful. And there was a lot of, it was a very tense situation, I would say, when Joe and I kind of walked in. And so one of the things that Joe started doing, and he mentioned this a little bit earlier, was these leadership site visits, bringing everybody together out on the construction site. And we started with going to projects that were, I would say, the most turbulent, so had maybe the most delays, had been under construction the longest, and brought together every member of the project team. So not just the construction contractor, not just the project managers, but grants managers, lawyers, really everybody who had a hand in moving the project forward or not moving the project forward. to just talk about the issues, talk about them, and come up with solutions on site. And we have found that those have been incredibly useful. We do about 2 to 3 project site visits every week, and that's something that is going to continue. The other thing that we are doing are infrastructure industry days. Previously, we're doing them quarterly. They've really done, I would say, twice a year. But this is an opportunity where we bring together the industry and tell them about the opportunities coming down the pipeline. Obviously, we want we want people to be able to participate, our local companies to be able to participate in all the infrastructure opportunities in the city. And this is a way to do that. And I know Joe and team are in the process of planning the next Infrastructure Industry Day later this year, and it's going to be done in concert with a job fair, because we have a lot of vacancies and a lot of opportunities for people to come and serve in city government. Another way that we are, I think we've improved the coordination with contractors is quarterly meetings that happen between the Association of General Contractors, the Association of Civil Engineering Companies, the city, and Sewage and Water Board. And I think it's very important that we understand, or we continue to understand, issues that are coming up in the program, from everybody who's participating in it. And we come to the table and we listen to each other and we really try to come up with, solutions, programmatic solutions together. And I think it's been incredibly valuable. Those meetings, I hope, will continue on a regular basis, because I think it's what's needed to continue to move the program forward. Okay, Joe's going to let me do it. I know.
Hey, this is
Nothing
her last
like the
day.
last day.
It took a little coercion to get her coming in here, but, I'm going to make her work today before she leaves.
So coordination with Sewage and Water Board as our partner and other agencies is also, critically important as we continue to move the program forward. One of the things that we found was that there were a lot of meetings happening when we stepped in this role. There were a lot of redundancies and probably too many meetings that didn't have a defined purpose. So that's something that Joe and I really focused on. And we've come to a point where now we have weekly meetings with Sewage and Water Board in addition to the site visits to coordinate on all of our joint projects, because we are certainly in this together. We have monthly meetings with FEMA and GOSEP. Remember, this is a cost reimbursable program, so as we complete work and put in our request for reimbursement, go through GOSEP. So monthly meetings to make sure that they're aware of our progress, and that's all important, as we continue to want to push for moving the period of performance off to the right. One of the other challenges we have, and this will probably come up in questions, is in the past there's been a lot of times when we'll get an inquiry about an issue in the street, and there's some sort of finger pointing back and forth between Sewage and Water Board and the Department of Public Works. And we've done a lot of work, I think, to make sure that doesn't continue to happen. Part of that is having monthly meetings between Sewage and Water Board's networks or maintenance department or maintenance area and Department of Public Works maintenance. And those are meetings that will continue. Another thing that we are doing are joint field visits. So when issues come up that may be sewer related, maybe drainage related, we're not sure, but going out in the field together with our techs to determine what the path forward is. And I think that's incredibly useful. As we move projects into construction, all outside agencies, so this is kind of refers to Entergy, Cox, really any utility that might have a role in the program, they're all invited to the table to participate in what's called plan in hand meetings, so that we limit the kind of surprises out in the field that Joe mentioned earlier on. And then, of course, quarterly meetings with FEMA leadership. I mean, this is absolutely critical. We need to update them on our progress so that they, as long as they see progress, as long as they see us moving projects, issuing notice to proceed for construction, we believe that we'll be able to push the period of performance even further.
Okay, on this slide here, when we talk about bond projects versus FEMA projects, naturally, somebody told me a long time ago in business that you always want to spend other people's money and use other people's things. Well, we want to spend all our FEMA money. We want to spend all our HUD money. Right now on our HUD green infrastructure projects that are out right now, we have a period of performance that runs into 2025. As I told you earlier, the FEMA period of performance for the JIRR single settlement is February 2024. We have projects right now that we've signed and submitted to GOSEP, via GOSEP to FEMA, that I'm hopeful within the next week will extend this program to 2025. So we are really pushing that envelope of the Katrina disaster to the right. But to push it to the right, we have to provide FEMA those NTPs, those notice to proceed for construction projects that we're putting in the ground. Now, Sarah mentioned CDM Smith. Not only do they help us with our training, our PMs, and our financial analysis, they also help us with strategic placement of any projects that we're going to put into the neighborhoods. So we look at the neighborhoods where we don't have work, and those are the opportunities for us to put new projects in as we finish. Those wave 1, wave 2 projects that I talked about earlier, those are my nemesis. I have to finish those projects. And I voiced that to the construction companies that we need to move and get out of those neighborhoods with a quality package. And so we can start new work in the other neighborhoods, and we can finish the FEMA period of performance, and also finish spending those funds. Now, when we talk about bond projects, I would say, Sarah, bond projects are more maintenance type projects that we put in the neighborhoods, or right-of-way projects. So when I told you about those plan changes and scope changes from mill and overlay to full depth reconstruction and neighborhoods where we run into issues, conflict boxes that we have to build, a lot of times it's not in the FEMA scope of work. So we have to go back to our bond, street, road, major, minor road funding to use that money to prop those projects up to finish the neighborhoods.
Okay, I'm going to go through the next couple slides very, very quickly because I think we're probably talking too much, and I just want to give you some big picture numbers before we get into the question and answers. So since May 18, we kind of talked about this on the first slide, so we have completed 171 projects with an estimated value of $668 million. Pretty incredible numbers. And today we've got 50 roadwork projects under construction with an estimated value of $649 million. So we know it's been a painful process, but we are making progress every day, and we are continuing to move on. So these are just a couple pictures of some road work going on around the city, but I did want to just show you this map really quickly. We talked a little bit about this. So we spent a lot of time kind of thinking about the messaging and how we talk about exactly how much work is happening around the city in this infrastructure program. It's a little hard to see the colors here, but what you're looking at are so we have 20,000 blocks in the city of New Orleans, of which about 10,000 are going to be covered. So the orange is ongoing construction. That represents about 24% of the blocks. The green is completed work, 32%, and the blue is future construction, 44%. So basically what you're seeing, 56% of the blocks are either in construction or completed. So it's just sort of a visual way to look at that. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we have completed a significant amount of projects since May of 2022. We have 16 projects that have that reached substantial completion, between May and December of 2022. This shows just a completed full-depth reconstruction project. So you're looking at brand new concrete roadway, new sidewalks, all new subsurface utilities. This shows some additional projects that were completed between January and August of 2023, so that's 21 projects. I know I'm going through these quickly. I'm sure we'll get you copies of the slides, but the important thing to recognize is that we're seeing projects completed in every council district around the city. And this shows another full-depth reconstruction roadway, brand new utilities underneath, new striping, new flex posts. Between now and the end of the year, we are scheduled to reach substantial completion on another 26 projects. And again, you see that we're touching every single council district around the city. And then quickly, so these are projects that have been recently awarded. And what's really, I think, encouraging, I will tell you that in the bid and award process, we're seeing a lot more competition. We're consistently seeing 4 or 5 contractors bidding on all of our work. So we're starting to see the bids come back in line with what our estimates have been. And you're seeing a lot of, I think, variety in terms of the contractors that are going to be supporting this work. Okay, I'm going to probably stop talking. We'll get to Q&A.
Thanks so much, Sarah and Joe. I just want to make sure we've got time for the many questions that we're hearing from people. What to start off with is, you've mentioned like very large numbers about the amount of work that's been completed, but it's still, when you're talking $686 million worth of projects being completed and things like that, that's still only a fraction of $2.2 billion. And as Joe had mentioned, the program's supposed to be completed by February of 2024. You're trying to extend it to February of 2025. How are you going to get there?
Yeah, I would say, so we need to push as many projects as possible into construction by February of 2024. It doesn't mean that everything has to be wrapped up. So it's not like February comes and everything needs to be done. So push as many projects as we can into construction, but it's a delicate balance. I mean, we are really working to be more strategic about how we put projects out into construction. We know that neighborhoods have been overwhelmed. Marleyville is a great example of that, where we have, I think, 7 different projects happening at one time. It's sort of the perfect storm, and we've learned a lot from that about what not to do. But I think, again, the more that we finish up these older projects and get them done, the more projects we can put out into construction. But it's again, we need to be very conscious of not getting in these situations where we overwhelm neighborhoods with too many construction contractors working at once.
Yeah, and if I could, just knowing too much, I think about FEMA, just being in that position, is that the single settlement that went through arbitration is obligated through the Office of Management and Budget in the FEMA headquarters. So this is money sitting at GOSEP. So we're drawing that money down, and the way that money goes away is through a de-obligation. And a de-obligation comes when that project or single settlement shows that it's not moving. We're going to keep moving, and we're going to keep moving the NTPs for construction and the money. And I can't guarantee it, but just being in that realm of the federal government, I know that if we're showing progress, and I've got support from the FEMA Region 6 administrator that we're making project, who will be here in November to take a look for himself, I'm almost confident that we're going to finish this project. We've just got to keep working, and we've got to get out of wave 1 and 2.
I have a question for the audience. Of all of you out there, how many of you live in a neighborhood where you have seen a road construction project in your neighborhood start and then sit for more than 6 months without anything happening? Show of hands. Okay. So you guys have been working hard to consolidate work and get that under control, yet what you've described is that the way that you're going to be able to spend more of the money is to have a notice to proceed for construction to start. So how do you balance that need to issue the notices to proceed to get things going with the desire of residents to have the construction be consolidated, and so that you don't have projects going on for quite so long?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things I would say. One, Joe's mentioned these Wave 1 and Wave 2 projects, which were the first ones to get underway. And again, contractors went out and started digging. And remember, the scoping happened back in 2008, 2009, 2010. So obviously things continued to deteriorate. So when construction contractors went in and started digging, the situation that they found was much different than what it was years and years before. So that's what led to all of the upscoping, plan changes, delays, block sitting, all of that. So all of the newer projects have been rescoped. So the engineer has gone back out to take a look at the conditions on site. They've been rescoped, and the task order-based contracting is really, I think, the game changer for us that is going to help to solve for that. So again, the contractor gets 200 blocks. They only get a smaller task order of blocks to work on. And that is really helping to solve the problem that you're talking about. We are not seeing these kinds of issues in the newer task order-based projects that are underway.
And to add to that, Sarah, when the contractor with a low bid got 200 blocks, they excavated 200 blocks. They dug it all up at once. So with the task order, it will prevent that to where we can excavate a few blocks at a time, finish the work, get out of the neighborhood. In the past, 200 blocks was excavated and 200 blocks were left open for a very long time, and that was a big problem for me.
You mentioned that the FEMA administrator will be coming here in November to check things out. What are you going to be trying to demonstrate to the FEMA administrator at that point to get them to extend this project and extend the money?
Well, the last visit, he comes, Tony Robinson, the FEMA Region 6 administrator, comes every quarter to monitor our progress. And it's not only the street road projects for a single settlement, it's also the hazard mitigation projects that we've got going on. If you know now, we just awarded Oak Park, St. Rock is rolling in hazard mitigation. We've got a big Broadmoor project that's getting ready to start. But he's also coming to look at our capital project. We have FEMA-funded Katrina work building vertical buildings, whether it's parks, libraries, jails, sheriff's offices, warehouses. We're still building on the capital side also. So FEMA, Tony Robinson is coming in November to see our progress on the road program, which I think we've got good news for him, to see our progress on the capital side, to where we did a notice to proceed just last week to start construction and renovations of municipal traffic court. That's one of our Katrina-funded projects that we're working right now.
You've referenced in your presentation that the projects are coming in a lot more expensive than when they were originally scoped out. And also, Joe, you referenced the idea that you're looking to get additional resources for the program. Can you tell us more about what you're thinking for the financing of these projects and what sorts of funds you're seeking?
Naturally, like I said, you know, the budgets at times were for issue. We had a FEMA-funded project for the OJC, the medical facility at the sheriff's location. It was initially FEMA funded at $40 million. It went to $100 million. So all of that, you know, the gap filler is through our bond program. So with that, you know, naturally we need more money. We're working right now. I'm working to move a second tranche of the resident voted bond sale of $200 million. And also, we are working through the Office of Resilience that's under my purview to go after IJA money. We're talking to the Department of Transportation with the state, and we're also campaigning through the Intergovernment Affairs Office through the city and the state with our congressional leaders to kind of socialize and campaign for more dollars for streets and roads.
Do you see a need to issue additional debt on these projects?
I don't know if it's an appetite for that right now.
Okay.
The voters voted for a $500 million bond sale. We have not finished that sale yet. We're going in the last tranche of that for $200 million. I think the next administration is going to have to talk about that with the voters to get more debt for streets and roads. But right now, I would rather, you know, go through the state DOTD or the formula funding that's coming down through the IJA program.
And I think, I hope that as we continue to demonstrate that we can complete these projects and complete them efficiently, that there will be an appetite for that in the future, because we need it.
Yeah, okay. You referenced the company CDM coming in to assist the city. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about what they'll be doing. And we have a question on, you know, please clarify how adequate is the DPW contract administration staff to monitor, direct, and approve these contracts and task-based projects?
Yeah, so, you know, CDM Smith has been onboarding, I would say, for the last 4 or 5 weeks, and they've started sort of in a similar way that Joe and I did, and which is just, you know, meeting with everybody, interviewing people, interviewing staff, you know, interviewing contractors, engineers, to really understand what the landscape is right now, so that they can properly advise on things going forward. And I think that they can, validate some of the changes that we've made over the past year. I think in terms of our staffing, for the programs and projects branch, we have adequate staffing in terms of our project managers to manage these projects. We are continuously hiring. I think that's very important, and we're trying to, one of the things that I've been focused on over the last year is really figuring out how to invest in our staff and our PMs and build the morale so that they feel appreciated and they want to continue to grow, with the city and continue to just continue to stay on with the program. So I do feel that we have adequate staff to manage these projects.
Okay, great. We have several questions referencing the report cards that you talked about for city roadwork contractors. How is that information used, and what are the consequences for contractors who receive poor performance assessments?
Yeah, contractor accountability it's an important topic. The scores of those evaluations can be used in concert with other information, during the bid and award process. So it's very important. And contractors are rated in a few different areas. Public convenience is one of them. So impacts to the residents is included in that. Safety and security of the site. There are 4 or 5 different categories that are looked at every month, and a number of questions underneath each category. And again, all that information is public and out on Roadwork, so I would certainly encourage you to go out there and take a look at that. Contract accountability is something that we've taken very seriously and we've taken a hard stance on. Most of the contractors, I think, are working pretty well with us and are on board with a lot of the changes that we've made, and they have really become partners. But there are other contractors that have not been doing that and have not been, treating the neighborhoods in which they work in a way that we feel like they should. And so we have done things like issue cure letters, where we, identify issues that we are seeing out on the construction site, and a contractor typically has 30 days to cure and resolve those issues. And we have even, unfortunately been in a situation where we've had to terminate a contract for convenience. And those are tools that we have in our toolbox, and we're going to continue to use them, as we move this program forward.
Yeah, and naturally, it's some things you don't want to do, because when we cure and sign those cure letters and send them out, naturally we're telling the contractor to cure this, or we're going to terminate contract. We go to the performance bond company and say, hey, send us another company, or we have to re-advertise. So it's going to add a longer delay and a longer time frame for a neighbor or a resident have to wait for the construction to be completed. So that's the last resort, but we've done a lot here in the last few months because we just can't wait for the companies to get out of those neighborhoods I talked about.
All right. We have an audience question. Has there been consideration to levy fines on utilities if they neglect to come to the table for planning meetings to do the work while a street is open and then later tear up a street that was recently repaired?
You want to take that one?
That's a big problem. That's a big problem because, the utility companies right now, we can have a brand new street that gets torn up by a utility company, whether it be Energy, Cox Cable, AT&T. We have coordination meetings with the utilities before we start construction, but at the present, I don't think there's any fines for those, right?
There isn't fines. I mean, there aren't fines, but there are definitely efforts underway. There's Dig Once policy, which is something that is in process and needs to continue, where a utility comes to the table to participate in a project and has an opportunity to upgrade their facilities, and if they choose not to, they can't touch that street unless it's an emergency situation for 5 years. And so I think that's a policy that we're definitely going to look at, in the future. But it's definitely a challenge. The other thing I would say, not every project is full depth reconstruction. Of course, we wish we had the funding to be able to fully reconstruct everything. So, we all know we live in a 300-year-old city with old pipes. So it is not completely out of the ordinary. It's not uncommon if a patch mill and overlay, just resurfacing of the roadway is done, that there's going to have to be utility work done in the future on the pipes underneath.
When this program started, there was a lot of talk in the Lander administration about the economic development opportunities that came with this, and contracting directly with many small companies to be able to get money directly in their pockets and give the work directly to them. Has the city stayed with that approach, or has that evolved over time? And can you talk a little bit about how that's worked out?
Yeah, so there is a 35% goal, DBE goal, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise goal for all of our contracts. And so we have continued with that, started by the Lander administration. And we've had some challenges along the way, but we obviously want small businesses to be able to participate in our infrastructure work. But yes, that has continued.
And I think also that on our FEMA grants and our HUD grants, we had, when I first came in, we really broke our contracts down into smaller levels for small businesses and $5 million and below. So small companies could take advantage of some of the construction projects and capital projects that we have going on right now.
Okay. You guys referenced in your presentation that in many cases you've gone deeper than the original scope of the projects because more work was needed. Can you talk a little bit more about how you prioritize these roadwork projects?
Sure. The original plan for the earlier projects, so again, they were organized in waves. I'm just talking about the FEMA projects. And basically the projects that were planned for a patch mill and overlay or incidental road repairs and required less time to design, those projects were done first. And then the planned, at that time, full depth reconstruction projects were saved for the later waves of projects. And they were organized so that there were various projects in each neighborhood. So you might have, I keep going back to Marleyville A, B, C, and D, and then organized in such a way that you'd sequence it in a way that you wouldn't shut down a neighborhood. So that's how those projects were organized and prioritized. In terms of our bond projects, we balance those requests that come in via 311, requests that come in for council, and then we have to, because there's so much need out there in terms of our bond roadwork projects, we really have to prioritize them based on the severity of the roadway. So just as an example of that, one of the things that we've seen with the extreme heat is that areas where there was subsidence, we're seeing roadway failures. We had one out in the New Orleans East on Bundy Road near the I-10 service road. We had a roadway failure, so obviously, we have to prioritize that. And we've got a pretty significant one right now on General de Gaulle, where we're having to replace about 12 or 13 concrete roadway panels because of a roadway failure. So it's a challenge because we have a lot of need and we have limited, bond funds in which to meet that need. But we have to prioritize severity.
Thank you. BGR has written a lot over the years about the fact that the city doesn't allocate enough resources each year to pay for the maintenance of roads. As streets are rebuilt through the Roadwork NOLA program, is the city making plans to maintain them, and if so, how?
That's a great question. One of the things that I'm really excited about for the future is our asset management system. So the city hasn't had an asset management system, to manage the assets in the public right-of-way, not just the roadways, but every asset that the Department of Public Works has. So catch basins, street lights, really everything. And we've just completed a 6-month process. We had a company called Cyclomedia come down and collect all of the assets in the public right-of-way. So we have all of these data sets, and the next step is going to be issuing an RFP this year for what the software will be to house all of that data. And that's going to allow us to do preventative maintenance and manage our assets in a way that I think hasn't been done before. Part of that was getting the pavement condition as well. So that's going to be part of that. I think asset management is absolutely the way forward, and I'm very excited about that for our city.
Okay. And finally, we're having lots of questions, or several questions from the audience about the two of you up here. People are wondering, Sarah, and Joe, what is the plan for replacing, filling the all-important Director of Public Works position? And Joe, do you plan to stay through the duration of this program?
I think you're looking at the new DPW director right now. At present, by proxy, I think I'm the guy. So, I'm going to miss Sarah when she leaves. But, my plan is, like I said earlier, I started this with FEMA right after Katrina. I signed grants for $37 billion to rebuild this city. Started with Mayor Nagin and then with Mitch Landrieu to start with parks, pools, and then the recovery school district. And this is just the final piece of that to do as much as I can, in this administration for the mayor. My service is to the residents of the city and trying to do as much as I can to make it a better place. I'm going to stay here as long as I can and do as much as I can until that gets done.
And if I could just add, I would say, my goal when I stepped into the role in particular of, acting DPW director was to leave the department, in a better place than when I found it. And I think we're absolutely there. I think morale is completely different, from the day that I walked in there. I think people are working together very well. It's a very high, performing team. They're very synchronized. They're having a lot of fun together. They respect each other. They really like each other. And I think they're really set up to continue to succeed, going forward.
Okay. Poco, I think you had one more question.
Can you talk about it? Drainage consolidation?
And that's basically about the drainage consolidation. The stormwater fee, that's what you're talking about. It's very difficult. It's very difficult, the Sewer and Water Board being a state, regulated agency. The mayor sits as a chairman on that Sewer and Water Board, but we have really not a lot of control of the Sewer and Water Board. We participate in funding. We just moved a lot of funding for the power plant for the Sewer and Water Board. We contributed part of fair share to support the Sewer and Water Board on service cuts, which are a big problem in the city, as you know, when we have water leaks and water breaks, that they make those service cuts, but they can't keep up with the paving. So that's a big problem. I have been worked in other cities in public works, and most cities in the United States of America, the public works incorporates all of the above. It's water, streets, road, asphalt, snow, you name it. So it's a unique situation with this. Right now, we're working through the IAB board to look at the consolidation to where the Sewer and Water Board would own all the drainage, catch basins, you name it. But with that comes money. Everything runs by money, and I think the way they're looking at is you can't ask all the residents to support that, but I think right now they're looking at some type of stormwater fee to people who are not paying water right now to support that that unit. Whether we combine at one point is yet to be seen. But as long as the Sewer and Water Board is regulated by the state and we're the city, that's something that's going to have to happen at the state level or congressional level.
I wish we had more time for questions, but we need to wrap up. Thank you, Joe Threat and Sarah Porteous, for speaking with us today. Really appreciate it. And thanks again to First Horizon Bank for its generous sponsorship of this BGR breakfast briefing, and thanks to all of you for making time to be with us this morning. Please remember to complete your online survey. It's really helpful to us as we plan more of these events. I'd also like to mention that a recording of today's BGR breakfast briefing will soon be available on our website, bgr.org. It will also be rebroadcast on WWNO New Orleans Public Radio next Wednesday, October 4th at 9 9 p.m. We hope this event has been informative and that we will see you again at future BGR events. Please watch for a new round of research reports in the coming months and follow us on social media. Have a wonderful day. Thanks again.